Besides the hammers, the stand is the most important accessory to the dulcimer. It determines the angle and height at which you'll play the instrument. Portability is also important, so I prefer this folding design. I used 2 5-foot-long poplar dowels and cut about a foot off of one of them, making the 2 halves of the stand. I rip cut both poles, plus a third smaller piece. You can see it on the table here. This piece and the end of the longer pole will become the hinge points for the stand. These hinge points need to be in line and parallel with each other for the stand to open smoothly. Both hinge points are cut 35 degrees offset from the main shaft of the stand. When the stand is closed, they're facing opposite directions from each other, so the stand can't open. But once you rotate the stand legs about 90 degrees from each other, the hinges become parallel and you can open it. The other angle, the one that makes contact with the ground and with the dulcimer, is 53 degrees. This is just an estimation of what angle each leg of the stand will make with the ground once it's stood up. The goal is that these stand legs make as much contact as possible with the ground and with the dulcimer on top. This angle can change depending on your preference of how high you want the dulcimer when playing. To create the main joint of the stand, I just clamped it together, drilled a hole through, and used a bolt and nut on each side. Once it stood well and stowed well, I finished it with wax. I've since made another stand, out of oak instead. Closet poles also work really well. For the hammers, I cut blocks of walnut and locust from some bigger planks. I lightly superglued 2 pieces of locust against each other and traced the shape of the hammers. After which I was able to pry the pieces apart and have 2 identical hammers. I glued small caps of walnut onto the handle for grip. I then used a Dremel to carve the caps flush to the rest of the handle. I have a separate video on my channel where I make fancier hammers and I show the process in much more detail. The dampers were an especially satisfying part to make, once I got them right. The dampers you see at the end of part 1 didn't actually work well, and after some more experimentation, I managed to make dampers that do the job well, using only supplies from various local hardware stores. I cut this 1/4-inch aluminum channel at the 50 and 60 degree angles and distances that match the top and bottom of the dulcimer. I filled them with 1/4-inch square wooden dowels and drilled holes for bolts on either end that are fastened with acorn nuts underneath. Then I spray painted the whole thing black. I glued together pieces of weather stripping felt to meet the profile of the strings at each nut. For springs, I used hacksaw blades snapped in half. I ground the blades off and rounded the corners on a bench grinder. On my drill press, I drilled holes that allow the springs to be fastened to the underside of each end of each damper. Bending them gently, a little at a time, will put them into the proper shape. The pedal was another case of finding the best design later, after a few attempts, so I'll show you my new favorite way to make the pedal. The point is to use the natural range of motion of the hinge to restrict the pedal's range to only the angles at which you actually use it, so that it's convenient and never flips around. I plan around the general size of the hinge and trace on some guides for the saws. Just going to be able to get it perfectly circular at the belt sander stage. The precision isn't so important here because we will have a chance to make finer adjustments with the belt sander later on. Yeah. So we've diagonally sanded this groove on the upper foot side of the pedal for the hinge to sit in, and it's going to look like this. You're going to sand these spiky screw ends off. Sparks have died down. They're flat. The case was made by my mom. I gave her a wooden frame and foam padding, and she added many layers of fabric and many useful pockets on the outside of the case.
And then a big pocket here. Lots of layers.
The strap is one loop and is adjustable in case you want to carry it on your shoulder or just with your hand.